Wake up and deliver.
Good morning, everybody, to another Wake Up and Deliver. This week, as always, we have John and myself, and we have a special guest, Martin. And we're going to be talking about all things logistics like we do, and it's going to be a great time. Before we start, we always do a little bit of morning coffee information, a little bit of something to get our minds going. Today's tiny thought. It can be difficult to appreciate how much avoiding the standard ways of failing dramatically increases the odds of success. I thought that was a bit of a different perspective on something that we always look at what's the best ways to succeed, but sometimes it's good to look at what's the standard ways of failing and avoid that one. So
Okay.
I thought that was solid.
I think it's kind of interesting, but now I'm wondering, did they give examples, or do you have examples? What's the standard way to fail?
Didn't give an example. It's like a tiny thought. It's like a newsletter. It's supposed to be like meditative, John. It's supposed to kind of deep into your.
It's a legitimate question. What's the standard way to fail? If there's a standard for success, it's what do people think about the standard failure? And it's curious. I might look that up later and be what's the standard concept of failure?
We should have it out there. Maybe we should have a whole thing about failing and ways to avoid it, because I think everybody just focuses on success. With that, today we have a special guest all the way from Europe. So it's a great perspective in the different ways of looking at things. We have Martin. Martin, if you want to take a quick second to introduce yourself and what you work on, it would be fantastic.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm Martin. I'm from Slovenia, Europe, a mathematician by profession. Worked practically all of my career in IT for logistics, starting in vehicle tracking and then computing some data or processing this big data to get some useful information. Then also going to route optimization, time-dependent routing, then also smart city topics for a while, and now again back to focusing on route optimization, especially stealth routing. And by the way, I've also spent 5 months in US, so I do have some perspective from Europe, and I also have seen and experienced a little bit of how US is like.
Perfect. So John, I'll let you kind of take it away, because routing is your favorite topic. You love all things last mile, middle mile, especially the efficiencies of it. Where do you want to begin on this week's?
Well, I'm gonna help Martin out, because Martin and I first connected when I was working somewhere else. So he has some unique perspectives and different ways to do things. Martin, I think probably obviously one of the things that you do that not too many people really talk about, and even when we had our first conversation, whenever that was, sometime last year, is the concept of alternative routing. And I was wondering if you could maybe just give a frame and to help people understand, when you can choose from going to, point A to B, very often think that there's, maybe one way or just two ways, but there can be a lot of the time many different ways, especially when you're in these dense metropolitan areas where you have a lot of different streets, for example. And I'm sure that everybody has experienced the challenge of driving with Google Maps or Apple Maps that are obviously caked into everything that people are doing with their smartphones these days, seeing an accident or, seeing some type of way that Google will tell you to take. And all of a sudden, even though it's supposed to be a faster way or a better way, it gets slammed because now everybody is doing a certain type of route. All of a sudden that maybe the roads can't handle, or that, there's just too much traffic in general because of an event. Funny enough, to put that in perspective, when I was in Scotland back in 2019, and I actually hope I'm going to say this properly. I've never actually really looked it up, but I went to a place like a mountain called the Currang. And I got there really haphazardly. I wasn't really planning on like hiking this mountain or anything. So I put it in. And as I was going through this small town, there was a sign on the side of the road that clearly some local who has just experienced a lot of frustration finally decided to try to do something about it. And they literally just write, turn here. If you keep going straight, you're going to end up in the wrong place. Google is wrong. So I thought I thought that was hilarious. So anyways, I turned and ended up in the right place. But that's kind of the concept of like, everyone now just blindly following the GPS. So Martin, that was a way extended intro, but maybe share a little bit about what a lot of what you do is, which is that like alternative routing or approach to the routing type problem.
Yes. Well, what you just mentioned reminded me of something that happened to me a while ago. I was also traveling around in France, also used some GPS navigation, and ended up somewhere in the fields. It was quite it was a dirt road. So luckily I did manage to get through, but it was an adventure, let's say. So that can happen. And this, well, how I actually got into this alternative routes or stealth routing. Well, anyway, I'm a mathematician, as mentioned, and I'm just passionate about optimizing things and also saving money. This is really
That's
my
always a
main
popular
It's a very
passion
good
to have. Yeah.
yeah, saving money.
to that. Also, when I travel around, I'm good in doing things really low budget and so on. But the thing is, I used to work for a while also for a Canadian company, which is one of the leaders in route optimization. And once we were at a sales training, and we were comparing plans versus execution. And we all know that it's a very difficult mathematical problem. So usually, almost always, computers find better solutions. But in one case, the execution was better, like 10% shorter. Maybe time was like 2% longer. And I asked my colleague, well, how's that possible that somebody did a better job than our super duper algorithm? And he said, well, the guy didn't drive where he was supposed to. He took a shortcut. And I was,
Imagine
what?
that from an optimization engine being like, oh well, he didn't follow the path, he found something better, it was his problem.
He used old knowledge that he's always had and always took that route because he knew it was a better route. That happens.
Yeah. And I said, well, why don't we suggest the shortcuts then? But found out that actually it's, again, another difficult problem to find a lot of shortcuts and select the ones which are good. And then afterwards, it took me really many years to finally develop this algorithm, which can provide a lot of options, which are all the best in some sense, and also select the ones which are the most appropriate in a given situation. So that means if you have a multi-leg route, all the time constraints at different locations, total working time, and so on. And eventually, we tested that on a lot of cases, and we saw that we can improve the classic solutions by additional 5 to 15%. So even if you already use route optimization, which typically saves 10 to 30% of the cost, we can save additional 5 to 15% on the top of that. So that was really something I was quite happy about. And now
Yes.
we're working on this. If I may just add a few things. So another thing that we noticed as an added value to that is, for example, for security companies or anybody that transports high value goods or high profile people. If you have a lot of different options, different possible routes, you become less predictable and therefore safer. And because if somebody wants to attack you, they don't know where to ambush you. So this is another very important added value. And another thing also, well, this stealth routing, it's actually multi-objective optimization. So we optimize at several objectives at once, kind of organically, because sometimes you're not able to decide upfront what is more important for you, or sometimes people just give a weighted sum of, let's say, length and distance or fuel costs and I don't know something, and they think, oh, I've optimized this. No, it's still not multi-objective optimization, proper one. So if you don't do it, you lose some solutions which may be better, and this is what we're doing right now.
Yeah, no, and to be fair, and so just to be clear for everyone, Matt and I don't really like we don't do plugs or anything like that. So Martin's up here, he's talking about obviously his business. Happy to have people sharing. I will though, Martin, from my own experience, like I've been doing this now 20 years. Route optimization, network optimization has been part of my responsibility set pretty much since I was like a frontline supervisor. Within 6 months of working in logistics, I've been doing this kind of stuff. I can very honestly say that sort of, your approach in talking to you is very different than most companies. And I think I shared this with you when we first spoke, like last year or whatever. But honestly, straight up, probably the most
What makes
really
it so different, John?
really interesting kind of approach to route optimization compared to everyone else. Because honestly, these days I still get hit up for it all the time. People looking for partnerships and different kinds of things or whatever. And it's the most like basic and boring and quite frankly, just
So,
I think
John,
quasi BS like approach to route optimization because it's really not the level of depth that needs to be.
what makes it so unique, John? Like what's like talk about it, because I don't do route optimization.
Well, I mean,
to me, it's fucking alien. But what makes a route optimization software so much better or different? Like for me, like you pop it into Google and off you go. Like how many different choices
well,
can you have that increase that in?
yeah, and I'm gonna let Martin get into that. But I mean, I think the concept, Martin, that I would just start with is the sense that every algorithm to sort of cut down on possibilities and to cut down on computing and to give users the answer as quickly as possible works through some kind of heuristics where it will very quickly start to like limit options and say, oh, I've decided I'm going to go in like this direction. So it's like, think about just saying you're going to do a bunch of tasks for the day, but you decide 100% you're doing this first or you're making that first left. Like everything that could be considered if you took a right or went straight just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? So there's certain like logic that goes into it. And Martin, like I said, you could probably get into it in a lot better detail than I could.
Yes. So what we actually do is we add a new dimension to the problem, something that nobody else considered so far. In a way that typical route optimization, it computes the matrix of all the locations first. So times and distances needed to get from one location to another.
Mhm.
And then when they have this matrix, then they optimize on that. So trying different combinations and so on. And typically, everybody uses the fastest route or fastest path between pairs of locations, which is good because that way you can pack the most locations on a single route. However, as mentioned, sometimes you can find shortcuts which are fast enough. And if you use them, you can really decrease the mileage and fuel cost and emissions. And this is what we've done. So we've seen that with all the constraints that you have, you can still reduce the distance by additional 5 to 15%. And this is just in case when time and distance is considered. But it could also be used for many other purposes, the same algorithm. Or first, it may be other objectives. it's up to you what you want. But maybe, I don't know, some want to decrease energy consumption and costs and perhaps safety, maybe to decrease the probability of some road accidents or something like that. So any objective that can be described with a number, we can use it to optimize according to.
So I was going to just jump in. Most routing softwares, I always found it like challenging because it's either using the car way of going in, and a transport truck can't go down it, and then it says it's more optimized or better route, but in reality there might be a low bridge or anything like that, anything along those lines that might not be truck friendly, or the turn might be a small street to turn into, and that truck is not optimized to go into that route. How do you guys kind of figure out, is that the best place for a truck to be within that optimization? Because I've always wondered about that.
Well, that's mostly up to the data that you have. You have to start with good data, meaning road network description, database, and that road network has to have also the information about allowed heights and weights and widths and so on of the vehicles. And then, of course, we can define different vehicle types and see which roads they're allowed to take. And the optimization then goes taking this into account. Of course, you cannot send somebody through a road which is not accessible for that type of vehicle or that kind of vehicle.
So and I agree with you. You know, having the database obviously and the road types and usually, Matt, that's the issue, is like your map provider of who's got good quality data, who's keeping it up to date, and all of these different things. How about something that's a little bit more now of a real world application, a real world constraint that's starting to come up, that's, I would say, is kind of new for
mine wasn't real world for you, John?
No, I just mean in the sense, I shouldn't say that. I think like that type of problem and like optimizing at the commercial vehicle level, this is what I'm going to call now a traditional problem. I think what's really starting to be interesting when it comes to logistics, last mile, and everything like that is that this gig work economy is becoming a new type of stressor, because you have all of these new companies, you have all of these new people doing deliveries, you have all these startups that are either making software or doing their own development for routing. But I'm going to tell you straight up, like, the vast majority of people will not have like someone like Martin's pedigree. So you're getting developers who are maybe great developers, but they're just using Google Maps or Apple Maps, or using Here or whatever, and they're just using some really basic approaches to quote unquote route optimization to try to be the most efficient. But here's an interesting problem, is that when you have 1 million, 5 million, 10 million gig workers on the roads, and they're all using Google Maps and they're all essentially using the same algorithm, you keep ending up into the same type of problem now, where I'm pushing traffic. Like, Google ends up shaping traffic based on what they think is going on, or the way that they perceive it to flow. And it may not be the best. Sort of, I started with that, but it made me think about it, because even this morning, and Martin, this is something over in Europe, but they've been doing the same thing here. They started, Amazon announced another partnership over in Europe with Just Eat Takeaway, to be like, oh, now Prime members get access to the food delivery and blah, 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 which is a whole other kind of series of nonsensical stuff. Because I've never in my life been shopping on Amazon and then been like, oh, I want a burrito. But the idea,
you don't get hungry shopping on Amazon? Jesus, I'm an outlier.
I'm starting to think I'm just weird AF in general, because none of these things speak to me. People are like, oh yeah, you can now order with Amazon, it's going to be fantastic. It's like, not once ever in my life have I been like, oh man, do you know what would complete my life right now? Being able to hit the next tab and order my lunch. Like, that's just never crossed my mind.
Do you know how many times I've been shopping and I would go, man, I could eat some pierogies right now. If Amazon told me, hey, we got pierogies for you.
Oh my
God. That's a
Matt,
done deal.
Matt does this to me. He does this to me all the time. He just takes these positions and I'm like, really? And then I realize like 5 minutes later, he's just joking. it's like nonsense. But my point with this being is that legitimately, to bring it back to the conversation, is that services that like sort of Martin and like what you're doing, or that approach and that thinking to routing about alternatives, I think is going to become much more important, because when you're thinking about one of the biggest challenges to have that efficiency and that density and that quality of last mile is congestion, and managing congestion, and essentially not getting stuck in congestion, because then it, you know, it burns more of your shift, it burns more of your time, you can do less work, blah, blah, blah. But with all of these different apps now using a lot of these mainstream tools for a quote unquote route optimization, you're going to have this real problem where it's like, man, my whole street's dominated by the bike courier. You're going to get the Scotland problem all over the place because of, you know, Bob's Burritos. And I think more alternatives are going to be really necessary. And I don't think that there's that many people that really can think of it properly.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And there are two things that I would like to somehow discuss what you mentioned. So the first thing is everybody's using the same tools. That's more or less true. And also, the problem is bad or non-aligned vocabulary. You know, there are a lot of buzzwords, and everybody uses those buzzwords, but everybody understands them in a
Like game
different way.
changer.
Yeah, of course. Well, but even for example, route optimization. Years ago, I talked to somebody and I asked them, "Do you have route optimization?" Of course, yes, we do. We use Google Maps to find a good route from point A to point B. You know, but in my vocabulary, route optimization means something different. You know, or dynamic routing. Somebody said, "Oh yeah, we do dynamic routing because our routes are different every day. We don't have fixed routes, so that's dynamic routing." In my vocabulary, dynamic routing would be to change the route throughout the day. You know, when some additional. So there's a lot of things that people are discussing, and a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, we have this," but they have something totally else in mind. So there's a mismatch of communication. So that's one problem. And the second thing is you mentioned congestions. Absolutely, we were also involved in a project where we tried to develop a next generation traffic management center, because right now, of course, traffic is managed by Google or Waze or something like that, and they send everyone through the same fastest route at that moment, and that gets clocked really fast, you know. And then they say, "Oh, this route is better," and then everybody goes there, and that gets clocked. But if you would manage the traffic flow in a better way, so to distribute it in a better way, and also if let's say city management could access and modify the traffic lights and so on in order to let more traffic through, the traffic jams would decrease drastically.
Oh my God.
So there's a lot of opportunities and possibilities how to do things better. And I'm sometimes, you know, just breaks my heart when I go to a company and see how they do things. You know, sometimes just makes me cry. And there's so many opportunities what to do, how to do things better. For example, also once we did a study for a port, a container port, and it's just point to point, you know. And I said, well, probably we won't be useful here. Nothing can be done. But because every transport of container is done with its own vehicle, if you just combine import and export operations, you can save 25% of the cost. You know, so very often, even I'm surprised. I think something will not work, but when you see it in reality and how things are really done.
Oh yeah.
It's funny about the terms because it's common across logistics. Like I talked about this not long ago. Even like shuttle run, like everybody has a different definition of. And I got this argument with Kat. She's like, "Oh, what does it mean?" I'm like, "Well, I think it means this." And then I realized there's like 15 different versions of what people understand and see it as. And then there's a lot of little terms like that, like, milk run, consolidation. What do you mean when you're consolidating? And everybody just has this different perception of what it means. So I think those terminologies are defining them.
What's your shuttle run definition? Now I'm curious. The people want to know.
You're pulling a mat now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because I'm curious to see if I think the same or not.
Well, for me, it was a shuttle run is done something by the company within an intra transfer between its two facilities. So you shuttle run it across from, let's say, one of the warehouses, like Amazon would do in Toronto. They have 5 or 6 different warehouses, and it's done on its own equipment, and it shuttle runs its inventory across the different warehouses. And it incorporates that definition, but there's other definitions out there that are similar, just slightly.
And what was CAT's?
I would have to. I don't remember. Kat would have to raise her hand and come up here and say it. And I don't want to say it incorrectly because I'll get in trouble later. But she's willing to speak here.
Yeah, put her up. Let's see. Let's get the shuttle run debate. So, Kat, what was the shuttle run? What was your take?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did have a conversation with somebody that actually used that term in their corporation.
And they're French Canadian.
That's right. And it was really transfers between 2 facilities, 2 warehouses, but one dedicated truck that would grab inventory from warehouse 1, bring it to warehouse B, and from warehouse B would bring it to warehouse 1. So it was really back and forth, just transfers of inventory on one truck for the whole day.
Yeah. So, okay. I that's kind of interesting. I would agree kind of with both of you. I definitely shuttle run. Someone says that to me. It's like it's an intra network kind of move. And I would have a tendency to agree that my exposure with shuttle runs implied a lot more, regular activity to it. So whether it was certain days, all day back and forth, or X amount of hours per day of back and forth, that it would kind of be like, it's a run, it's work to do, it's a shuttle run. So it's like very, defined and usually obviously shorter distance. But yeah, so I don't know. Sounds like it's all in the same ballpark, but with some nuance.
Yeah, and I asked that question if it was just pertaining to that company, and he's like, well, that's just the term that we use because that truck is doing that shuttle run, is back and forth transfers throughout the day, and then when everything is done, then that's that, right? That's the routing.
Yeah.
Good morning, by the way. I didn't even say good morning.
That's okay. We put you up. I put you on the spot right away, being like, bring her up. We want to know what the shuttle run is.
Jeez.
But no, it's interesting to see what you're right, like all of these different terms, and for sure I think that that's something that everybody, when you're speaking about a new project or a different type of thing, is to try to get alignment on what people actually think is happening. The dynamic routing issues is a really good one. And the funny thing about even stuff like that is that people don't even realize that there are alternatives. I mean, a lot of these new companies that have come up these days just kind of think that the whole idea of logistics or last mile, the only option is surviving the wave. That's the only option you have, is like, I just get slammed every day and I try to do the best I can with the mess. And they don't even consider that there could be different ways to approach the problem. So I think that is probably something super, super telling.
And also the use of the buzzwords, like, I do dynamic logistics. I do dynamic route. They don't even, some people don't even know there's an actual meaning behind that has a very specific context that means far different things. And they could unfortunately lead specific customers on that they're going, hey, I'm getting some dynamic routing. And they find out they're getting, Google Classic, walking routing on it. It's not really the dynamic alternate routing that you're getting throughout the day. And I thought that was a quite good definition of it, where it's constantly changing depending on the circumstances of the day. Hurricane made landfall today, so we're gonna have to take these different routes or avoid Houston to save this. We're gonna save X amount by not being in this traffic, and taking those calculations of idling in and all that makes it dynamic. And I think that routing is that type of routing is
Well,
quite comprehensive.
and Martin
important.
made a great point. Honestly, the biggest issue I think these days with how accessible the tech has become and how kind of, I'll say, abused in some ways too, because everyone is kind of just doing their own thing, is that you very much get the traffic jam problem with what's going on now. And it's so funny. Years ago, I read this book about traffic, which was a recommendation, and it was kind of weird. But like the end of the book sucks, but the first like 3 or 4 chapters are very cool. You learn a lot, and the concept that like when you're on a highway or you're a road or something like that, and you all of a sudden get hit in traffic, is that very often happens from an event that happened like 30 minutes before. And you kind of eventually deal with the domino aspect, and the longer it goes through time, the more it sort of reverberates, and then like it's just like you're slammed. But the interesting thing with it is, to Martin's point, is that like we're in a very reactive state with road optimization, and everyone's talking about like, oh, I want to use the same technology to put little 4-wheeled robots all over the streets. Like, could you imagine the hot, just disgusting mess it would be trying to walk down some of these streets, and you got like these little like Bebo robots everywhere, like beeping and pausing and whatever, because everybody keeps using the same algorithms. Like, it's insane. And the fact that there's no like central activity, in the same way that my biggest hope for self-driving cars is that you'd finally take all the selfishness out of it, and the cars will all like participate and like drive properly over the roads. Because right now you're getting everybody using the same algorithms down the same streets, and then it's very reactive, even if they have quote unquote dynamic in-day routing, because it's like, oh, there's a traffic jam, I'm going to reroute right. Oh, there's another traffic jam, I'm going to reroute left. And it's just pushing stuff around instead of taking a very, distributed approach. Like, how cool, Martin, would it be if the cities were like, companies have to apply essentially for capacity on the roadways, and it's like they could only use certain amount per, certain hours in certain areas.
Yes, of course. If you watch the movie Brilliant Mind, it's about also Nash equilibrium. So if everybody is trying to somehow find the best solution just for them, it ends up in a huge mess. So you have to take others into account also in order to somehow optimize the global situation. So being very self-centered, egocentric is not the best way to go.
No, exactly right. And that to me would be like, if I could pick one use case for AI right now, because I think I bitch about it on a daily basis. Like I hate driving, oddly enough, being in logistics. Personally, for me, if someone's like, hey, do you want to drive for the next 12 hours? It'd be like, nah, no, not really. But like, the funny thing is that if I could pick the first real use case for like true AI, it's like, we have all of these smart systems so that we can drive self-driving cars and cameras that can identify issues. It's like, please put a camera at all of the intersections, and please then allow the AI to properly, quote unquote, dynamically adjust the traffic lights, instead of having it just wait at one because it's on some archaic time-based system. It's like, please just let it change it when it knows it can change it to make sense.
This was done already, actually. I'm also partnering with a company here, Iskra, and they've done just this. Yeah, kind of fuzzy or adaptable.
So you're living in utopia, is what you're telling me.
In some senses, yeah. I also have a great wife, and a few good things happen to me.
So John, you love the 3 a.m. red light, no cars at intersection for 5 minutes. Is you want to hear a story?
I shouldn't even admit to this one, but like, so years ago we were playing poker one night after work, and this was like when I was much younger. And driving back, it was like 2, 3 in the morning, and I'm sitting at this red light. And literally, I was being like a good Samaritan and everything. I waited for like, I think it was 7 minutes, because it's like burned into my brain. It feels like a 7. And then finally, I'm like looking around. It's like a ghost town. The tumbleweeds are just like very casually like rolling through the intersection. I just turned left on the red. And I don't know if there's some countries where like that's cool, but here you're not allowed. And the second I did it, it's like, these lights come on. I'm like, where was this guy? He was
waiting.
And and you can imagine, because it's like 3 a.m, he's like just hoping he's pinning someone from the bar at this point, right? And it's like comes up, starts giving me the hardest time, and he's like, "Do you know why I'm pulling you over?" I'm like, "Probably because I just turned on that red light." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "That doesn't seem like a very smart decision for someone who's maybe thinking clearly." I'm like, "Oh yeah." I'm like, "Really? Is it a smarter decision to wait there for 10 minutes for the unending end of my life?" And he's just like, he pulls me out of the car and whatever. Obviously it was fine. But the point was, is that like, yeah, it was just sitting there dead stop red, no one around, no value. And like, we're trained to just sit there like, and just wait. And we have to just
Obey.
wait. It's
So don't go ahead, Martin.
just to get the ticket quota up, to be like, who's turning left on the reds?
To get those drivers all upset for those midnight deliveries. Like, imagine being a driver and you have to get there on time. You have that long red light at that intersection, middle of the night. Man, you go nuts and have to deal with it every single. You probably find a way. Well, isn't that why? Was it FedEx or UPS did the no left turn thing? It's now
right turn. Yeah,
right turn.
Well, the right turn thing is just because most of the cities allow you to do that. So net, even though sometimes it might seem weird, like going up an extra block or whatever, it ended up saving time. I don't think they do that anymore, though. Oddly enough, like that made a lot of news. I don't know, back in the 90s or whatever. But I don't think it's employed, and even in most routing software, Martin, I don't think that by default that's an option. I think sometimes you can turn it on, but I don't think it's a core part of the algorithm to always assume right turns.
Yeah, it's not for us. I'm not sure about the others, but yeah, we don't have it as default.
Yep.
I think Rob made a good point. He made a comment that
it's also a difference in Europe and US, because in US you're by default allowed to make a right turn also on the red light.
Mhm.
In Europe you're not. So
Really? We have Quebec.
yeah.
Quebec is like that, and Ontario is very close to Quebec, and Ottawa, where I am now, is even closer to like Quebec and stuff like that. And that's always the biggest thing, is like people stressing. Like, imagine the stress that comes into your life, because it's like you're driving around and it's like, can I turn on the left or can I not? And then you get into Quebec and it's like they've changed the rules. So it's like, well, if you're not on the island of Montreal, it's okay, but if you're on the island, it's not okay. But then some neighborhoods are back to being like, no, there's no turning on the red. It's maddening. I just let people do it. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not so utopian after all. We found a flaw.
Right turns are massive on red lights. I don't know. I couldn't live in a place you can't take. I just do it anyway.
Oh.
Okay, watch out. Coming back to Poland.
Yeah, Matt's gonna be the guy who's like, all of a sudden he's like, how did his route just get 15% better? It's like, this guy, he's turning right on red all the time.
I have that new clicker that I can click on the light and it changes for me. I don't know if you guys see it
like in hackers or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Make all the lights green because I've hacked in with my AI on that. Right? Unless everybody uses it and just constantly
and then
in
the lights are just flashing like Christmas lights or whatever. Like, yeah.
But on that note, go ahead. Sorry, Martin. I'll let you have the last bit because we're a little bit over, but we'll let you take it away.
Just time for a short joke. I remembered due to John's experience with cops. So there's a guy drunk driving back home, and he's lost, and he stops somewhere, and a cop notices him and comes to him and knocks on the window, and he opens up and he says, "Oh, so good, happy to have you here. You know, I'm a bit drunk and I got lost. Can you tell me where am I?" And the cop said, "Well, do you know who am I?" And he said, "I don't know where I am," and he doesn't even know who he is. So, yeah.
The cop doesn't know who he is.
Who he is, yeah.
Could you imagine though? It's like you roll down the it's like, "Hey, I'm blitzed. How do I get home?" Be like, "Well, not tonight, my friend."
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it happens more often than not, right? So, anyways, John, go ahead, Martin. Yeah,
life is interesting. Yeah.
John, take it away. Close her off since I opened.
I will close it off, but actually, just quickly, Martin, give just quickly yourself how to get in touch with you and like your company and stuff, because we didn't really let you have that clear of
that's true.
an
Good
intro.
point.
Perfect. Yeah, so my email is martin.pekar, P-E-C-A-R, at omniopti.si, or martin@omnioptius.com. And I guess people can also find me through LinkedIn. I guess I'll be somehow connected to this episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the best way to get to me.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you everyone for listening this morning. Very cool to be able to get into these very specific conversations. Last week it was ice cream. That one's posted and up. This one will be posted and stuff like that. So we usually do share the links, obviously, in the chat so that you guys can keep up with the episodes. Next week, I don't know. We don't have anything planned yet. We'll see how the week goes, what comes up. Might just be interesting and go through the regular week. So lots going on as summer's already half over. It's so sad, but unfortunately,
And we have that return one with Jessica, I think at the end of next week. The video one. So it's gonna be our once a month live video with Jess, and we're talking about
the
returns.
19th, eh? We said
Yes,
yeah.
I believe it was the 19th. It should be an interesting, fun one. And yeah, on that note,
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Enjoy your day and wake up and deliver. Thank you for joining.
Bye.
That's it.